Good morning, all. Welcome to Shaheen Chishti Show. This show I will be presenting on a weekly basis. It's a podcast that will interview a woman who will describe her upbringing and if she's encountered any issues in that upbringing, and try to discuss generally the lives of women from various parts of the world. I welcome you to this show and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Ms. Ba. How are you today? आप कैसी हैं?
Good morning, sir. I'm really fine. I'm doing great.
Good.
How are
Good to
you?
see you. I'm good, thank you. It's not as good and as sunny as your part of the world, but yeah, it's good enough to be good Friday. तो मिसबा, आप अपने थोड़ा मैंने आपके बारे में पढ़ा, तो आप मुझे बताइए कि आप जब बड़ी हुई तो आई बिलीव कि आप दिल्ली में बोर्न हुई थी, तो मुझे कुछ बताइए कि वहां पर कैसे आपका जन्म हुआ और किस तरह से आपका बचपन गुजरा, प्लीज।
मैं born इंदौर में हुई थी. इंदौर
अच्छा,
is
sorry.
a beautiful city in Madhya
जी.
Pradesh, right? And
जी,
it is
जी.
also the cleanliest city of our nation. And
जी.
Indore में I was born in a middle class family. We had a home there, and it was a joint family. It was really nice to play with cousins, and I was in Indore for about 3 years, and then we
Yeah.
shifted to Delhi because of my father's job. And
Right.
since then I was there only until my graduation, and
Yeah.
then again like it was not my priority to come back to Indore, but something happened, and then I'm here for my post graduation. I'm doing masters in social work, my
Yeah.
specialization in medical and psychiatric social work. So
Right.
here I am.
Wonderful. No, I'm honored that you are on our show today and that we're getting the opportunity to interact. So मुझे ये बताइए कि जो जनता है भारत की, वो जानना चाहती है कि basically the public of India wants to know what sort of issues does a young girl faces in the Indian society. तो मुझे कुछ उसकी बारे में बताइए, क्योंकि मैं चाहता हूँ कि हम उसको लोगों को बताएं, जो हमारी बहनें हैं, हमारी माएँ हैं, हमारी जो दोस्त हैं और हमारे जो बच्चे हैं, बच्चियां हैं, उनको पता चले कि क्या क्या चीजें हम फेस करते हैं, उससे लर्न कर सकें हम उस बारे में। तो आप मुझे बताइए कि आपको कौन कौन से प्रेशर्स लाइफ में हुए, आपको, क्योंकि आप मैं आपको देख रहा हूँ तो मुझे लगता है कि इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग कि आप एक वेरी नाइस एंड कंजर्वेटिव फैमिली से आई हैं माशाल्लाह, तो आई बिलीव, तो आप मुझे बताइए उसके बारे में कि आपको कैसे कैसे चीज फेस करनी पड़ी।
Okay, so if I talk about my parents, they are really
जी.
liberal. They
Mhm.
I mean, I don't need to ask for any kind of permission before doing anything. They let me
जी.
pursue my dreams. They let me study and all. I'm saying
जी.
this because my sisters in my family, in my immediate family, they are not allowed to study after a certain age, after a certain class. They are said like, no, you are marriageable after 18, so you should not go out. People should not see you. People should not see you with other gender. But if I talk about myself, that's not the case for me. My parents are really cool in this way.
So why
But
was
yeah.
the case? Why was the case like that with your other sisters? Because I call that in India the matrix syndrome. Because I studied Indian system quite closely, and I have a lot of cousins as well. I call that a matrix syndrome. So you study till matrix, and then the bells are ringing for you to be getting married quite quickly after that. So you are treated like a princesses up until matrix,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is equivalent to GCSEs in England. A school leaving exam. So tell me what pressures that women have on that particular point, because that is a very important and very pertinent point in Indian society still now. कि जब मैट्रिक करती हैं बच्चियां, जो हमारी युविकाएं हैं, उसके बाद उनको कहते हैं शादी कीजिए, तो what sort of pressures do you face at that point?
So my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles were like, now she has completed her class 12. Now it's the right time for her to find a perfect groom for her. But I very firmly told my parents that no, I want to study further. I have some dreams and I want to figure things out, because I used to live in Ghaziabad. It's in NCR portion, and my college was in Delhi. So I had to commute via metro till there, and it was a 2-hour long journey for me. So they were like, you should be always accompanied by her father and brother, whoever gets the time, they accompany.
So I think there are two points we can very easily pick there. One is that there's a mistrust in the in the gender itself, that they don't trust that their daughter or their mother or their sister can travel alone for 2 hours on a metro system, which is supposed to be free and fair for everyone and safe to a certain extent to be able to travel. And the second thing is that you were constantly under the watch of the other people who have no real reason to doubt your intention of what you wanted to do. So that's what I wanted to tell the Western audience, that an Indian woman has to go through this very much. Once she passes what we call GCSE, or in America we call it higher school leaving examination, she's under constant pressure to marry. And if she's not married and she pursue, like you did very commendably, your education, then they will basically make comments to make you feel uncomfortable or question your motives of traveling alone and all that sort of thing. And it's deemed that it's inappropriate for a woman to travel alone. The very fact that they are saying that you should be accompanied by a male, what does that say about our society? It says that we think that a male custodian is required in order for a woman to travel alone. That in itself is hypocrisy. So please carry on.
Yeah, and another thing was that when I started going to college, it was a Delhi university. It was in South Campus. My college was Sri Venkateshwara College. And Delhi University is like a very talked about issues, and everybody thinks that every girl of DU wears shorts, and she goes out of the hand when a girl enters Delhi University. She's all liberal. She doesn't follow religion. She doesn't obey her parents and all. So another thing that my so-called relatives were concerned about was about my dressing sense, like how she dresses. So when I started going to college, when I was in first year, I didn't used to wear hijab. And nobody in my family wears hijab. So I used to go in simple dresses like a girl should dress. I used to go. And then when I was in second year, I started wearing hijab. So initially also some of my relatives were so much concerned about my dressing sense. They were like, okay, oh, you should always drape yourself with a dupatta. It's okay if you're wearing jeans, but you should not wear it too tight. You should always wear a top of certain length. They were concerned about it. And when in second year, I studied theology. I studied it from different perspective. And I have wanted to wear hijab for like last 2 years. And then suddenly something happened. Everybody has their own spiritual needs and their ways of fulfilling them. So I read Quran, I read Hadith, I talked to several of my friends and my professors. And then I realized that this is my call, that I should wear it. I feel more comfortable with it. And this is my way of asserting my identity. So I started wearing it. Then another group of my relatives were like, no, you should going out alone. You should not wear hijab. When you're wearing hijab, everyone knows that you are Muslim, and you should not look Muslim. You should dress modestly, but you should not like too much of Muslim. You should look liberal Muslim. And they think that if you're wearing hijab, then you are under pressure from your friends or from your family members or from such groups. Especially my friends who don't know me personally. Some of my professors, they think that, you are so much educated, then why do you need to cover your head? I mean, this is my choice. This is my way of asserting your identity. So I believe women should not be told what to wear and what not to do. I know in various, in various countries, hijab is being forced on women, but this is not my case. And, everybody's case is everybody have their right, their way of asserting their identity, their way. You might feel comfortable in a certain way. This is my way. I feel comfortable like that. So yeah.
No, that's fair enough. I think it's your right to be able to decide what you want to wear, and I think we should support you in that, whether it's a bikini, mini dress, or a salwar kameez or a sari. I don't really mind. It's not for me to decide. It's for you to decide, and it's good to know that you reached a place in your life where you decided to wear hijab. It wasn't forced on you, which is quite good. So tell me. I also read very interestingly that you call yourself Misbah, but don't call yourself Misbah Khan. What's the story behind that? Why not the surname, please?
Yeah, actually, my surname is there on every document. But
Yeah.
when I wrote the novel, even my publisher asked me the very same question, like, why aren't you putting your second name? And like, I am the one who have written this novel. Like my birth certificate, my degrees, everything has my second name. But this is completely my the product of my own hard work. So my name is enough. I don't think I require my second name there. So
Would you
yeah.
say it is slightly? Would you say it is slightly in the sense that you think that the surname belongs to my father, and he's a man, and this work that I've done is from a perspective an independent work, and basically I think that I should get the credit for that rather than someone else. Is that the reasoning behind that, or is it something else that you think?
Yeah,
That you,
yeah. You can say it. This is very true.
yeah.
This is the primary reason, and the other reason is that whenever my friends call me, they don't call me Misbah Khan. They simply call me Misbah. So I want my reader to be my friends. I really want to befriend them. I don't want to be an author like standing on a pedestal and here are my readers. I don't want
Yeah.
anything like. I
Yeah.
believe we are all on the same ground. Yes, I know something.
So I
and
think that's a very important. That's a very important point that you make, and actually also you educate me as well today. And it's very important to look at that. Women may not need a second name. Women can just have one name going forward, which is their identity. It's been associated for centuries. That's a very, very important point that you're raising here today, and congratulations for sort of enlightening me on that as well. This point, something I could take forward. Basically, then when we say Neha Bakar or we say Misbah Khan, or we say someone's father or husband's name is put after their name, we don't necessarily need that. Perhaps a trend needs to be set whereby women or men, for that matter of fact, will have single names. They don't need to associate their son. I will be a biggest loser because I do have a surname which I do quite like, Chishti, and it's recognized all over the world. So I would be a loser, but I think I will advocate that point as well. I think there is a point in that because the second name is usually either husband's or basically father. So it's a male association associated with a woman in the sense to give her an identity. So
exactly.
in the very essence that they have this, it needs to be questioned and challenged. I think that's a fair point.
It's like who you belong to. Initially to father and then to your husband.
Yeah, very valid point, and I think that we should look at that as well. Maybe a single name fashion needs to start, perhaps, where women do not need to be associated with the father or husband's surname that they are given at the birth or at the marriage, and they are the only human bodies on this planet that has to change their name. Men don't need to change their. When they get married, they have to take the surname of the husband from the father. So there's a change which is expected and given to them. Maybe that needs to be challenged as well. So no, that's a good point. So in terms of your upbringing, tell me, I'm looking at from a distance. I have lived for 37 years in England. So I left as a baby from India, and I'm learning every day from young people like you. So basically, in terms of the discussions at home and things like that, you said you were brought up in a liberal atmosphere, but I have come to know a lot about things that don't get discussed, such as breast screening, for example. Apologies for saying that, or cervical cancer, or other women related issues. So did you find that easy to discuss? Or because I thought in Indian society or in a Pakistan subcontinental society, generally, it's basically the mother is left with the responsibility of teaching the daughter about these things. It's a complete taboo. So, for men to discuss this, and we all are victims of that as well. But I think there's something. How was your experience on that?
Yeah, initially when I was younger, when I was growing up, when I was entering into my adolescent age, these were all the hush topics. But now they are learning gradually. They are learning. Whenever I start a conversation about these taboo topics, about these hush topics, I can sense that they are not that comfortable. But they are learning from it. They do conversate with me about such topics. Even my fathers and my brother as well. My brother is like more liberal than my father, I must say. But beyond my immediate family members, beyond my father, mother, and my brother, I cannot talk about these topics to any other relative. So that's the thing. Now they are learning.
Yeah, so it's still very close. So it's quite an important point. Just to tell me, tell me, if you were, let's imagine that you have some, God forbid, but you have some let's say some disease or something which you need to talk urgently. Would you go to your mother? Would you go to your father? Would you keep continue suffering in silence? Because I think my experience in having interacted with the women in the subcontinent, a lot of them just suffer in silence, really. What do you think you would do?
I would first go to my mother, but
Right.
I will try to bring up this in our dining table conversation with my father as well, because I know that he is changing, he is understanding these concepts, but I also understand that they also need time. The kind of family they come from, they were way more conservative than what I am dealing with right now. So they need some time, and I think I also must give them that space and that time to grow and change.
But you know, one thing I find amazing in your reply, which I think the listeners should take note of, is that you will turn to your mother. But in that case, the mother has to be assumed to be educated to understand your problems. So that's where mother comes into. And if the mother is predominantly, in a lot of our cases, especially in the Indian Muslim society, they're not necessarily educated, and for them to understand any issues, it's basically a chance thing, because unless they go and take the trouble of finding out what exactly my daughter is suffering, they will not be able to give you the advice, or they may give you the wrong advice for that matter. And tell me about your pressures that you face for marriages and degree choices, and tell me how do you deal with those things, because obviously you must be approached for getting married, as they call it, settle down and maybe and all that drama that we associate with having a daughter in our society. Because all the drama about crying when the daughter leaves in itself is a very comical thing for me, because a daughter doesn't leave. She just goes to another house and she's just on the phone next day talking to you. So she doesn't really leave. So I don't know what this whole crying business is. It's called rukhsati, which I find quite comical at times. So please tell me a little bit about that.
So if I talk about my parents, they don't want me to get married. They're like, you keep staying with us. What's the problem? But if I talk about my other relatives, I won't name them, whatever. My other relatives, they are like, no, you should be married at a certain age. Otherwise, you won't find a groom. And you also don't look like your age. I'm skinny and all. So they are like, if you will get older, you will get wrinkles, and you won't be able to find a man who will match your personality, and all the right grooms will be taken away by other girls, and you will be left alone. But my grandmother, and she's now no more, it's been 4 years now, but my grandmother, my father, and my mother, they don't want me to get married. And also the second thing is, my parents asked me that if any time you find a guy who you think is right for you, then please come to us, tell us about him, and we will settle everything for it. So they are quite open-minded, but not others.
Right. Okay. So there are lots of pressure, continuous pressures on you, basically, from very young age.
More on my parents. My parents, because I can say that talk to my parents, or I don't want to get married, please don't bring this particular issue to me. Then they go to my parents, and then they were asked repetitively about my marriage and all. And then I feel quite sad often for them, because they cannot force me to get married. They won't do it. And they also have to at the same time deal with those family members who are also close to them, and their immediate family members. So they are quite stuck in a dilemma sort of thing between their daughters and their immediate relatives. So that's one thing that my parents deal with. And
so you're very well educated Indian Muslim. So tell me 3 things that we should improve for women in the Indian Muslim society. Because I meet all religion, all sectors, and I'm open to everybody. Love everybody. No one is our philosophy, Majmer. I will continue that. But I think in terms of 3 things that you had to pick, what would you say that we will need to improve? Obviously, you raised a number of points, which I am aware. I think very good point that you raised was that maybe women have to have a single name. They no longer need to have 2 double names, basically. And I think we need to maybe get away with that. That's a good point. I'll take that forward. But 3 things that come to your mind, which will improve the lives of Indian Muslim women, or Indian women, basically.
I will come to Indian women, but particularly if I talk about Muslim women, We all are taught Quran and Hadith from a very younger age. But I believe they should be taught it from a liberal point of view, and they should be led to read it by themselves, because whenever the issue relating to women comes, people are always there to release fatwa and all, and they come and talk about that hadith and that quote verse of the Quran. But what I have studied, whatever I am because I have read Quran and Hadith from my point of view. I have read it by myself. I haven't taken any help from any mullah or any so-called custodians of the religion. So this practice must be encouraged among all the Muslim women, because we don't even know the history of all the great Muslim women who have done amazing things single-handedly, and many of them were the wives of the Prophet and the companions of him. So that's the one thing. And the other thing, if I talk about the perspective of the keeping in perspective the whole Indian society, I believe women must be talked to and listened to. Whenever a policy is made, whenever a rule is made, nobody consult a woman. I mean, you are making a policy on me, you are making a rule for me, and you are consulting me. So I think that's not fair. And when you go and talk to a woman about their issue, you are halfway through to reaching closer to the solution. If a woman knows what she is going through and what her issues are, she definitely knows what can be done to improve her situation, what can be done to make her life less miserable. So just give women time and space to listen to her and talk about her issues. And third thing is, I believe women should be given more space. Women space in relation to whenever you have heard the word mehfil. Whenever there is a party, there is a gathering, there is a mehfil. Women are secluded, they are in the other corner of the room, and all the men are other side of the room gossiping about politics and all, and women are considered to be talking about what should be made and sharing recipes. So these both the genders should mingle more often and should exchange talks on the very ground level issues, and not just about what's happening in Iran and what's happening in other part of the world. And I mean, that points are too important, but let's start the talk with the ground realities. What's happening with you? If I am here and my family members are sitting around me, I want them to discuss with me what my problems are, what my future plans are, how I want to pursue my education, from where, in which subject, and how I want to settle in my life, in what ways. The space to have a healthy discussion, discussion that reaches to a point, that reaches somewhere, it should be given a chance. So
that's very good. I hope you will be reading our book, The Granddaughter Project, which is releasing on the 22nd of June and across the world.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Misbah. And I think we will probably look that you tell your friends to read it, because I think some of the points that you made are very points that I will be taking it right to the cities of India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and fighting for those points. The first point that you mentioned was the role of Khatija Raziallah Ta'ala Anha. She was the first wife of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and she was a trader. So 1500 years ago, she was a CEO of a company in Saudi Arabia, which is very difficult to even find now. And if we call Sunnat, we follow Sunnat, all of us in the world of Muslims, then it's a Sunnat of Muhammad, peace be upon him, to work for a woman. He worked for Khatija Raziallah Ta'ala Anha. So I think these are the points that we need to take forward. In terms of your second point, the space, I totally agree that there needs to be 35% reservation for women everywhere. I advocate that and I fight for that. Eventually it should be 50%, but I think if we start with 35% blueprint, that would be success. Because I believe that there are two hands, one is man and the other one is woman. So basically without one, you cannot function properly. You can function, but you can't function fully and properly. And I think it's in all societies of India and subcontinent, for that matter of fact, that we need to look at. That's predominantly where I work. And thirdly, of course, you said about having space, and that comes with education, that comes with generational things. And I think India is moving very, very nicely in the right direction. Women are getting liberated. Women are taking the positions of power. more will happen and more should
Yeah.
happen. And I think it will start from the top down. You know, जो बारिश होती है तो बारिश का पानी पहले छत पे आता है फिर नीचे तक आता है तो I think it takes time. But in India, it's taking a little
Right.
longer. But I think we should bear with what we have. I think all the governments, whether it's the present government or the previous government or the future governments, they're all committed to having representation of women. And I think we are a very proud nation that we had a female prime minister a lot earlier than the Western world. You know, Margaret Thatcher became a prime minister of Great Britain in the 80s. However, Mrs. Gandhi was a prime minister in India in the 1970s. And also the Muslim countries can take some credit in terms of Bangladesh and Pakistan, where they had female prime ministers as well. So we have a great tradition in what we call Akhand Bharat, the United India, to be able to be the representative of women. And we should carry in that tradition, I think. So it was lovely interacting with you. Anytime you have any questions, please keep in touch, and all the best with you.
Sure.
Keep challenging the narratives and keep challenging things. I learned something very good from you today, and God bless you.
Same here, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you. Bye-bye.